Virtual events are a new technology that's rolled out that's somewhat unexplained to the mass market. How do I get beyond the fear factor of the creation of a virtual event?
Sure, and the fear factor is real, and it's the first thing I think is to acknowledge it and to not let it get the best of your process. You need to create an environment where it's safe to just have ideas, and don't be afraid if it sounds crazy, because it might be crazy. But it's perfectly legitimate to just put the smartest people you have in a room, let them talk it out. And a lot of crazy ideas will fly by, but a lot of times a really good idea will be among them.
Well, there's the whole thing about taking a risk as part of a virtual event, and we talk about this quite a lot, like, is there such a thing as a calculated risk? I think that's an oxymoron. Yeah. I don't think that actually exists. I think the truth of the matter is that in order to move ahead in technology, you have to do something that sets your brand apart from everything else. How do we apply that to virtual events from the creative front? If
you are willing to go, be a little risky, be a little bold with it, there's a much better chance that you're going to have an impact on your users. People who are watching the show are going to remember it, so they're going to connect with your brand in a different way.
So it doesn't have to be this fear factor?
Absolutely not. The fear is real, it's there, but it can be managed very easily.
What if I'm a pharma company and I'm launching a new product, and the new product is around people dealing with chronic pain? Now, you want people to be able to connect with that within a virtual event with a very powerful and compelling creative message. What are some things that I could do to get that message across?
What is it that chronic pain robs you of? It's limiting your freedom, it's limiting your movement, it's limiting your ability to go out into the world and do things. And so maybe the idea would be to help people forget their pain. Bring them to Paris. Associating that with your brand and your products, again,
it's powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
It's limitless, and people will personalize it and they'll remember it. That's the most important thing. They'll remember it.
You can inspire and awe people. Here they are sitting in their office, they turn on the computer, and next thing you know, they're looking at the Eiffel Tower. And it surprises and makes people happy. And that's creating an intimacy. It's making people feel connected to you. Like, oh, they just did me a favor and made me feel like I'm sitting in a cafe in Paris. Great.
That's powerful virtual communication. And that creative messaging is the environment that you put around it.
But at the same time, we could also, if we're not going for otherworldliness, we could also create environments that are very unified and very connected, like this show, for instance, where the entire show is set in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And so we have that unifying theme, that really great unifying theme you came up with, I thought, with the trolley car, that basically takes you from one part of San Francisco to the other.
So one of the things that oftentimes perplexes people on the creative front is, how do I speak to the creative team? How do I give them feedback? How would you suggest that?
Well, first and foremost, understand that your creative people, at times, they might appear very emotional. They might appear to take your feedback perhaps a little more strongly than you meant it to. And that really comes from a core strength in creative people, in that they are highly emotional. They're really excited about what they do, and they really are interested in creating an emotional experience for the user. Constructive feedback is extraordinarily important. You need to be able to tell your creatives what isn't working for you. But you need to construct it in a way that it's actually positive, and that it's actually saying, how can we better serve the message?
So when you're talking to creative people, I think it's very important to let them know the message isn't in the forefront. Design is important. It really helps people recognize your brand, but it's not the only thing. It's ultimately the message.
Creatives often have to be reminded that they need to defend their choices. They often have a really good reason, but they're not always good at articulating that reason to most people.
Well, that's interesting, because a lot of creative people, exactly what we do is we draw and we sketch an idea that can be conveyed without words.
Sure, this isn't about making pretty pictures, it's about a message, exactly. It's about communication. And so if it's not serving that goal, you're absolutely right. The best looking design in the world could be wrong.
So a virtual event is a reflection of your product or your brand. I think that's very important for people to remember. The result of that is, where can we take people? We've talked about this before. We could take you to the moon. We could take you to an enchanted forest. Right. But there are other places that we can take you that maybe you didn't think about. Maybe you're on a New York City subway platform, and maybe every time the user steps on that platform, it actually takes them to someplace else. Right. Thinking about that from a user standpoint really ties back to to things that we've talked about with Steve Jobs passing is he thought about that.
Yes.
That was very crucial. The design was crucial. It was critical. As virtual event professionals, what do we need to consider on the creative front that sometimes we're missing?
The biggest one I think that you just mentioned was that you need to connect to your users. The user has to walk away from the experience feeling like the person who built this thing wanted me to be here, wanted me to have a good time, wanted me to get a certain point. If you're going to the moon, you can't just go to the moon. You have to have a reason to be going to the moon. Maybe you're NASA and you're launching some new program and you want to inspire that sense of awe, then the moon makes sense. So it can't be just out there and crazy and risky. It has to be purposeful.
It's important in a virtual event to talk about the things that we've discussed today, moving beyond the fear factor, really making a difference in your virtual event, how you fill in those details for users, and how you sell the message.
At the end of the day, someone has to log into the show and actually tune in, and you have to earn their respect. You have to earn their time because they're busy people, and so they're going to react to your show in a positive way if you've been respectful of their time and their attention.
Because really, ultimately, the message is power, and power is the message. It really does matter at the end of the day to make that connection.
Sure.
Well, cool. Thanks, Joe, and thank you, everyone, for attending this webcast for the virtual user experience on creativity in the cloud. Thank you.